Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life. So we're taking a look today at the differences in software between the Galaxy S5 and the HTC One M8. Now, as you know, Samsung uses TouchWiz, which is their skin atop Android, whereas HTC uses Sense 6.0, which is their newest version. They're completely different in terms of design, but yet they somehow still use very similar ideas, from lock screens to blink feed in my magazine and some things like that. Now, keep in mind, we've already done both of our reviews of each of these, so you'll want to check those out. But we wanted to continue to cover these because we know that some of you are going to buy these throughout the year, not just today. So let's continue the comparisons today. And we're starting first here with lock screens. So when you look at the lock screens, they're both fairly minimal. HTC actually is doing more, which is something you don't hear very often when somebody says that anybody does anything more than Samsung, but HTC is actually tossed in more features here. So obviously the shortcuts at the bottom are now gone in the Galaxy S5, whereas with the HTC you can grab a camera shortcut or a phone shortcut, and you can actually customize those. Samsung basically gave you one shortcut, which was the camera pull from the bottom right corner there. HTC, though, is building in all sorts of gestures, which we'll get to in a second. But in terms of just the lock button, you can actually swipe left, right, or up and get into different things, whether that be blink feed or just unlock the device or just unlock the device to where you last left off. I've kind of done some different things going on there. Whereas Samsung, you basically just swipe up on the screen or swipe right on the screen. It doesn't matter which way you swipe, it just unlocks the device. So Samsung, again, has really toned it down. You can obviously still access both notification bars. Samsung's really toned it down, which is something we don't say very often about Samsung's, which is kind of weird. Now, HTC's done some even cooler things where if the screen's off, you actually don't have to touch any buttons. You can actually do a double tap, and that will unlock or at least wake the device, I should say. You can swipe to the right and jump into blink feed, or you can swipe left and unlock the device. You can actually swipe down to get into some voice actions, which I can't do because I'm on airplane mode or don't have any connectivity. But so they've built in these gestures, which sort of makes their lock screen experience, I would say, better than Samsung's at this point. So that's essentially what you're looking at in terms of lock screens. Let's jump in now and get to the launchers. So with these up, and again, I didn't mention this, but I factory wiped both of these phones. So this is exactly what they'll look at the first time you boot them up. Now, obviously, it's kind of a traditional Android setup where you can swipe left or right and get into different pages and different things. HTC obviously has blink feed, which you saw, and Samsung has My Magazine, which we'll come back to in a second. But for the most part, their launchers are kind of similar. While the look is completely different, the way they act is kind of similar. So you long press, and you can tap Manage Home Screen Pages on the one, and you'll get into sort of this paginated look where you can edit pages, remove pages, add pages. Now Samsung's version over here actually does a little bit more. You can change wallpapers and widgets and some other settings in here, whereas the long press on HTC just gets you kind of into this area where you can move pages around and delete them. If you actually want to do widgets and things, there's another gesture altogether you kind of have to do, which is kind of odd, and it's pinch to zoom. So if you pinch to zoom on Samsung, you get to the same place, the long press, but you pinch to zoom on HTC, you actually get into your sort of widget menu. With Samsung, we just tap the widget button, you get it. So you can see it's kind of a different approach. Samsung's, maybe has the edge if we're doing a competition here, just because it's more robust in terms of all-in-one. Now, this is where we find something interesting. So if you swipe to the right, you'll get into HTC's blink feed, which has been around since the One M7. Same thing, though, now with Galaxy S5 called My Magazine, which is sort of a Flipboard-powered news reader. I would say My Magazine is not a very good news reader or news aggregator, whereas blink feed's actually a pretty solid product. But it's just interesting to see how Samsung is, I don't want to say copied them, but they've sort of taken that idea that HTC had and tried to run with it. One thing I didn't mention, though, is the button setup on both of the phones. So when you talk software, you have to talk about interacting with software. And HTC's gone with on-screen buttons, which is sort of what Google is trying to push as their standard. So you can, do things like swipe up from home to get to Google Now, or you have a dedicated multitasking button, and you can see the UI here is a little bit different. And then you also obviously have a back button. So on-screen buttons, we tend to prefer them. Although you could argue either way which one's better or not. Now Samsung is still kind of got their traditional layout here with a physical home button, but they did add a multitasking button and got rid of their menu button. They also swapped the back and multitasking button compared to what Google does or what HTC's done. Long pressing on the home button gets you into Google Now, so there's no swipe there. Again, we've seen this for years with Samsung, but it's changed just a little bit this year. Let's jump into the app drawers. So differences here, HTC scrolls vertically. It's also not transparent. You just kind of got a black background, whereas Samsung went horizontal and also has a transparent background. So you kind of get a little different effect there. They both have menu buttons where you can uninstall, disable, hide apps, change the view, things like that. HTC did kind of push theirs into two different menus. So this one you can change grid size and hide and remove and stuff like that. And then they also have a secondary menu on the top left where you can adjust it alphabetically and by custom and things like that. So nothing real big in there, just a different design idea and look. If we talk notification areas, you will see that completely different look in here. So Samsung for years has gone with these sort of quick toggles and also this brightness slider that you can adjust on the fly, whereas HTC is basically just a blank sort of notification pull down, which is kind of the Google standard way of doing it. With Samsung though, you can get into more quick toggles. You can edit your quick toggles. You can actually scroll between the list that's up top to toggle things off and on. And again, whereas HTC, you've really got nothing here. If you want to get to your quick toggles, you have to tap another button or use a 2-finger swipe down. They will let you edit them as well though. So you do kind of have some functionality. You can actually drag and drop items in and above and below this line. You can see this gray line in here, so you can kind of customize the experience there. It's just a different way of doing it. Can't tell you which one I really prefer, although I do kind of like Samsung's quick toggles that lay up at the top. I just wish you could maybe hide that from time to time or something like that. Let's look at a couple of apps though, just so you can see a simple app and how different they are. This is the dialer, obviously. So HTC lets you swipe between pages in the dialer, from phone to history to your favorites to groups and things like that. And it's really functional, and I really actually like their dialer a lot. Samsung, on the other hand, doesn't let you swipe between pages. You actually have to tap buttons up at the top. And this is sort of where we poke fun at Samsung for having a gingerbread-like experience in a lot of their phones. It seems like swiping would make that a lot easier to use, but it's kind of just how they do stuff. One thing we should look at too, though, is the keyboard. So keyboards here, I'm not going to really type anything, but you can just see they're completely different in terms of how they're designed and how they look. You can see Samsung actually has a dedicated number row, whereas HTC you still have to kind of long press in order to get into your numbers. They both have swiping or swipe style typing. They both predict fairly well. I actually prefer HTC's keyboard over Samsung's, but that's just my preference. I just find it to be more accurate and easier to type on, whereas Samsung's I just find to kind of be difficult to type on at times. The last thing we're going to look at then, or second to last thing I should say, is cameras. So the camera UIs here, and let's go landscape so you guys can really see what's going on here. Not completely different takes on cameras, but quite different. So HTC obviously has gone super minimal with theirs. You have a gallery button, a shutter button, and a mode button, which gets you into different shooting modes if you like. You also have a quick toggle for flash, and then you have a menu button, which gets you into your filters and your exposure settings and your lighting settings and things like that. Samsung has a video button, shutter button, a mode button, and a gallery button on its right side. So they've added an extra button compared to HTC. Then on the left side is where things get a little bit interesting. You have a button to flip between the front and back cameras. You have 3 customizable shortcuts, and then you have a settings button, which is substantial. So there's a lot of settings in here. One thing I do really like though is you can actually grab some of these shortcuts and drag them into this area I was talking about. So you can customize your 3 shortcuts. That one already exists. So you can customize it through. So does that one. So you can customize the 3 options there to make your camera experience sort of exactly how you'd like it. HTC kind of lets you do that as well. You can save camera settings as specific cameras and toggle those on and off pretty quickly. I would say both cameras are insanely fast though. For mobile smartphone cameras actually work really, really well. And obviously the 16 megapixel versus the 4 megapixel or ultra pixel is quite the different camera experience in terms of results, but we'll let you guys decide which you prefer there. So that's what you look at cameras. In terms of just overall design, it's obvious that HTC really likes to go a little more subtle. a little cleaner, maybe even a little flatter, although Samsung's trying to change that. But there's no better way to show that than in the settings menu. So HTC's kind of gone with the standard settings layout. It's really clean white background with just, dark print. And it works really well, and it makes sense because it's what we're used to. Whereas Samsung, you could scroll through this list and it just keeps going on and on. I believe they're pushing 40 options in their settings menu. Now you can actually also switch to this really terrible grid view that's completely overwhelming, although it does allow you to hide sections, which is kind of nice. But again, it's no more obvious than in this section right here than the differences in design on the between Samsung and HTC. So anyways, just been a quick comparison to show you guys kind of the differences here, what we like, what we kind of don't like, and just some general thoughts. We'll have more comparisons soon, so stick with us. We are Droid Life, and we're out. Peace.